Hey everyone, and welcome to Sasquatch Theory. In today's episode, we have Doug Hajicek on the show, and I want to start off by saying it was an absolute honor having Doug on as a guest. I remember years ago watching Doug on Monster Quest, and you could tell he really believed in what he was doing, and he was very serious about it. Doug has been featured on the History Channel, the Discovery Channel, and he has been doing research on the topic for many years now. It was nice to interview someone with a scientific approach, and you could tell he was very genuine about everything he encountered. Doug mentions in the interview that it's shocking science has not picked up the ball on providing evidence for Sasquatch, and he is still shocked to this present day. I would have to agree with him. Whenever I seen the Sasquatch here in Missouri, it just left way more questions than answers, and the more you look into the topic, the more you find out it's very taboo. People don't want to talk about it. Professionals who should be looking into this just look the other way. The people that don't know Sasquatch exist help discredit people by ridiculing them and making it very difficult for people to openly talk about the subject. In a world where war, hatred, and calling yourself something you're not is highly accepted, but people who believe in Bigfoot or the existence of an unknown creature are disregarded and ridiculed by the people. Denying the truth of the Sasquatch within our society can lead to future consequences if ignored for too long. In this video, Doug will talk about the facts regarding the subject and his methods he uses while out in the field. I have always looked up to John Bendernagel, Jeff Meldrum, David Politis, Steve from How to Hunt, and many other people who have provided evidence, testimonies, and they just get out there and look for these darn creatures. Doug is one of those guys who's not afraid to get his hands dirty and get out there in the field and look for some evidence. All right, guys, let's dive into this next interview with Doug Hajicek. All right, Doug, welcome to Sasquatch Theory. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing excellent. Doug, it is an absolute pleasure to have you on the show, and I've followed your work for many years, and I've seen you on shows such as Monster Quest and many other TV programs. Doug, if you would, tell us a little bit about yourself and your Bigfoot experiences and kind of how you got into all this.
Sure. That's a big can of worms, Miguel, but
Yeah, it is.
I'll try here. So basically in the 80s, I ended up getting a really good camera and a video camera. And I remember just spending a god-awful amount of money on a camera as I was really interested in photographing animals and doing wildlife photography. So I did that for a number of years. And then I had an idea to start an outdoor show with a writer and went into producing a show called, God, I can't even think of the name. It's called North Country. Sorry. And so I did North Country for years, and it was kind of a magazine format show. And that show, by the way, is still on the air, which is cool. But through that show, I started meeting wildlife researchers and got involved in wildlife research and started coming up with ideas. So I did that for a long time. Did a lot of first, like putting a camera in a bear den for the entire winter, putting the first camera in a beaver lodge, and discovering that they lived with muskrats, which was really cool. Putting the first internet webcam together for wildlife, and I put it at the bottom of Lake Superior. And that was called the Benthic Explorer. And so then I went on to do a bear documentary for Animal Planet, and then did the Legend Meets Science because I was up in the Arctic doing one of my other wildlife shows and came upon footprints. And these footprints were really clear in the sand. If you can imagine, the Arctic is, when you get up in the Arctic, it's almost like the Caribbean. It's a lot of sand dunes, and it's treeless in a lot of areas. Almost looks like kind of a desert area. But these footprints were clear in the sand. We followed them up to pea gravel. They were very deep. I could tell they were not, there's no way they were bear. And then they went in front of a very tall, for up there, about 7-foot tall black spruce tree that was stunted. And there was a footprint directly behind the trunk. And so I knew whatever it was stepped over the tree. And the guy that I was with, my buddy, he goes, we need to go now. Because he was envisioning too this huge animal that stepped over that tree. So bottom line is, I came home obsessed with Bigfoot, and that's what led me to Matt Moneymaker. Matt was kind enough to, spend time with me and educate me. He was also interested in the TV business that I was in, and we decided we're going to pitch doing Legend Meets Science. And so after quite a while, we finally got it on Discovery Channel and did Legend Meets Science. It was, based on getting a whole bunch of new information out to the public, that there actually was science on this topic, on the Bigfoot topic. And then from there, I went on to do Mysterious Encounters, which was, I could tell tons of stories on that. Mysterious Encounters was the first Bigfoot series on TV, but nobody saw it because it was on the Outdoor Life Network. Did you ever even hear that series, Miguel?
No, I don't think I have.
Yeah, well, it's called Mysterious Encounters. If you search on YouTube, I believe somebody has pirated, that series, and I believe you can find it. So I did that. And by the way, it was a hit on their network, but they decided they wanted to get into bull riding, and then they changed their name to now Versus, I believe. So from there, I started pitching a show called Giganto about Gigantopithecus blackie, and didn't go anywhere. Nobody wanted it, couldn't sell it, kept pitching it. Nothing happened. And one day I was watching TV, and there was a commercial on for the new King Kong movie that Peter Jackson was doing. And so I added the tagline, Giganto, the real King Kong. And that was picked up immediately, like the next day. My agent sold it the next day to History Channel. And that became the pilot for Monster Quest. And so I did Giganto. It aired, shattered records in the ratings. They called me up like the next day and said, hey, can you produce more of these? And you can only imagine I said yes. And then we negotiated out a contract literally by evening, and Monster Quest was born. So I'll kind of leave it up to there. I don't know where you want to go, but that's kind of my life story there in a nutshell.
Okay, Doug, I appreciate you sharing all that with me. And I would kind of like to get into Legend Meets Science or either Monster Quest. Like, what kind of experiences did you have there? Kind of talk about the area and, yeah, what'd you see?
Well, sure. Well, Legend Meets Science, I just thought it was a really cool concept. I love the name that I came up with. And it was really amazing to me that here I was, I was into the wildlife sciences, saw footprints with my own eyes. And by the way, there were thousands of footprints that leading off into the horizon. So I knew that we were dealing with a real creature. And so the realization that this thing was real, but yet science had no answers for me. It's kind of this happened in 91, kind of the infancy of the internet. But really, there wasn't much information. And I was just shocked. I mean, talking to Matt, he's like, oh man, he's like, these things are everywhere. There's woods, water, and hills. And I was like, really? But, everything he told me made sense. And everything Matt told me back in the 90s, I believe is true. So we got together a whole bunch of different, forensic labs to do DNA. We found a guy named Jimmy Chilcutt to look at the latent fingerprints, the friction ridges at the bottom of footprints. And we got Dr. Darrett Swindler to study the Achilles tendon that was very visible in the Skookum body cast. Got people to look at the hernia that I had discovered on the Patterson footage on the right thigh. And so, to me, it was just like, why hasn't anybody else done this? So I was just shocked. And to this day, I'm still a little shocked that no one ever really picked up the ball, with Bigfoot and science, because there's a lot of science that could be done. And so I'm now hard at work taking 24 brand new, actually 25. I just added another new category, 25 new categories of evidence that basically we're going to put under the microscope and let you meet science too. So that's kind of been keeping me busy. It's quite an undertaking, actually. It's not just, going out in the woods for one expedition and saying, oh, here's the doc. This is probably one of the toughest projects that I've ever done in my life, maybe the last, for me. And I don't even know when it'll be done because I'm just, working on it literally daily. And it'll be done when it's done. But it'll have 24 or 25 new categories. The 25th category we just added are all of these radial bone breaks found in deer carcasses all over the country, which can't be really produced by, a natural predator. It can't be a cougar. It can't be a wolf. It's got to be something that's twisting the bone, probably to get the bone marrow out. And if you can only imagine the strength. And so in this one category, we're going to do things like a torque test. How many hundreds or thousands of pounds of torque does it take a deer leg bone and twist it to break it, as an example?
Were you able to cast any of the tracks that you discovered?
Oh, up in snow? No, obviously I was up there filming. We were trying to get footage of giant lake trout. I was trying to be the first to capture footage of these lake trout that grow up to 6 feet long, that have been fabled. They've been seen by guides. I saw one myself swimming in the really clear water up at Knowlton Lake up in the Arctic. So I was just trying to get footage of that. So there's no way we would add blaster. And I did do a lot of photography on the tracks. But of course, I ended up doing a news story, turned it into NBC News, and they ran the story on this mystery, it was called The Mysteries of the North. So we did a story and it ran on the news, but they just recycled the tapes thinking they were worthless. So they took my original tapes and recorded over them. So it's kind of a heartbreaking.
Yeah,
so no, there's no records of them, but they were probably, 14 to 15 inches long. We didn't even have a ruler with us,
So way too big to be a man.
Oh, God, yes. Yeah. And you got to remember up there, there's not even any First Nations people living anymore up in the northern regions that we were at. There's nobody. In fact, we did find one abandoned native village that was up there that would probably have been abandoned for 40 years. So no, there was no humans. These things, my buddy was about 300 pounds, and I had him leap off a rock to try to duplicate the depth of these footprints. and the ground was damp because it had been kind of drizzling on and off all day. He leaped off a rock and couldn't even dent the soil hardly in the pea gravel. And yet this thing was crushed in to be maybe an inch and a half to 2 inches deep. So whatever it was, I estimate to be over 1,000, well over 1,000 pounds.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
What
like well over 1,000 pounds.
what's it like being in the Arctic and knowing that there's Sasquatch around? Like what was the feeling you got?
Well, to me, it was really weird because one, I'd never thought about Bigfoot, really. I mean, I'd seen the Patterson footage. I'd just, you know what I mean? It's just this strange realization is I just wanted answers. In fact, Miguel, I went up, we went back, we took a long, like 20-mile trip to get back to our base camp. And I pleaded with the float plane pilot to take us up because you got to remember in the Arctic, there's no tree cover. I mean, there's a few stands of trees like this little stand of stunted black spruce, but they're not thick enough to hide anything. So I pleaded with this float plane pilot to take us up because I had a broadcast, quality camera with me to take us up and just follow them, pick up those tracks and follow them to an end. I actually feel I would have gotten incredible footage that day if he would have listened to us. But instead, he thought we were hoaxing him. He thought we were playing a prank, which, to forgive him, that's kind of a thing in these camps, to play pranks on people. So he thought we were trying to pull a prank on him. And he got furious. He threw his clipboard against the tent wall and basically said, "Get out." He was pretty mad. His face was beet red. So we left. But I do regret not approaching him again, and saying, we were not hoaxing. Swear to God on my life, But I didn't do that. I was just too afraid, too intimidated to even approach the guy.
Yeah, that's understandable.
But it was life changing. I mean, I got back home. I couldn't think of anything else. I mean, my life made a right angle turn, literally that day. It hasn't been the same since. Because I still don't have the answers that I want, which is why Legend Meet Science 2 gives me the excuse to do more lab work, more of this expensive testing, looking deeper into things and trying to blow people's minds. I'm trying to raise the bar because if we can raise the bar, Miguel, then, more scientists will probably get involved.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm all about raising the bar, and hopefully I can provide some evidence one day as well.
That would be awesome. We're not going to solve the mystery. Even if we get DNA results, we won't solve it. But I think in the last 20, 30 years, it's been elevated. At least more people are familiar that Bigfoots could live, throughout the U.S., could live throughout Canada. I think people are more educated. Shows like Monster Quest, Finding Bigfoot, Expedition Bigfoot have helped because they were all prime time.
Yeah. And how does it make you feel, like knowing that you've been doing this for such a long time and there's still no answers today? I mean, we've progressed a little bit as far as like sharing encounters and people being open, but as far as like whistleblowers, you always hear about like alien and UFO whistleblowers, but you never really hear people from the government openly talk about Bigfoot. How does that make you feel?
Well, one, I don't think we have quite the same kind of conspiracy with Bigfoot and UFOs. I think the conspiracies start at the little forest office, the local DNR office. I think when a local DNR agent has a sighting, he's just not telling anybody. That's where the cover-up is. Or if the Bureau of Land Management office, a regional office in one area, finds footprints or has a sighting, it's just kind of shut up. They're just not talking about it. It's not going up to the higher ups. I really don't think the higher ups are all well informed. But I could be wrong. I could be wrong. For all I know, um, government officials could be listening to this podcast. Could be, doing things to thwart my efforts. I don't know. I mean, I don't have proof either way. But what I do know is there is cover-ups for sure on both ends. They are similar, but I just, I'm less eager to buy into the federal government involved in a Bigfoot. I think most of it's local, state, kind of state level cover-ups. That makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
I can tell you about a cover-up I discovered on a local level. I was up filming for Legend Meets Science, and we were right on the edge of Bureau of Land Management, right? BLM land, right on the edge. And we were mapping an entire mountain with LiDAR radar back in probably it was 1999, maybe it was 2000. And we're mapping this entire mountain, and a whole group of black SUVs came streaming in. And they were just questioning, what are we doing? And it was kind of weird. What are we doing? They took me aside. What are you guys doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? Are you? And they wanted to make sure we weren't filming on Bureau of Land Management. And what we weren't. We were on the edge, but we weren't filming there. And so a number of days later, the same caravan of black SUVs came in. And I went, wow, this is weird. I thought maybe they were going to, ask me more questions. So I just went into my tent, literally just to kind of hear what's going on. So they pulled in, they talked to our camp cook, and they said, where's Mr. Hajicek? And so the guy's name was Art Lyons. He directed him to come, where I was. And I heard the guy outside my tent, hey, Mr. Hajicek, you got a moment to talk? So I go and he wants to talk in private. So I'm like, oh God, was the guy going to arrest me, for filming without a permit or, who knows? He takes me aside and he goes, I failed to mention the time before when I told them what I was doing, I reversed everything and I said, have you guys ever had any Bigfoot activity or found anything or heard anything or seen anything? And they all denied it. They said no. So this time, the guy's taking me aside. This is like 3 days later. And he goes, do you remember when you asked me that question, whether we've had any activity? And we said no. He goes, we lied. And I went, oh, really? He said, yeah, we found, numerous footprints that we can't identify. We've also found big human-like footprints in the cow pies in the wintertime when they're doing surveys. So some creatures running barefoot, with a size 15 barefoot, stepping in cow pies. Doesn't make any sense, does it? Well, this is what they were finding. And they actually had collected and cast some of these footprints. And he offered for me to go to the BLM office and look at the tracks because they just wanted answers. So there's kind of the level of cover-up, if that makes sense.
Yeah, they definitely admitted that they know what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. They knew exactly what we were doing. And I think, us mapping the whole mountain, because I told them there was a Bigfoot sighting here and we wanted to get size estimates. They knew about that creature because they had been finding its tracks already, So there's there's a firsthand acknowledgement of a cover-up. And that is a cover-up.
I agree with Matt Moneymaker that these things are everywhere.
Well, it seems to be a geographic problem. It's not a demographic problem. It's a geographic problem. They are exactly where there's woods, water, and hills, where there's sufficient rainfall, where the habitat for Bigfoot seems to overlap into black bear territory. Some guy actually came out with that study because he was trying to prove that all Bigfoot sightings were black bear sightings, which is ridiculous because black bears have no shoulders at all, no shoulder blades. They're very narrow when they stand. And of course, all the Bigfoot witnesses talk about it's one of the first things they notice, the huge, broad shoulders, right?
Yeah.
But to get back to the geographic areas, very seldom has any sighting of a Bigfoot ever been had that's beyond 500 yards from water. So they're definitely, the word water ape, or the phrase water ape, to me is very, very fitting. For some reason, they won't wander away far from water. Now, is that because that's where the most cover is? Is it because they require to drink a lot of water? Or are there certain plants that they require to eat as a good part of their diet? There's some reason they don't venture from water.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely believe they travel the waterways, and I think they can find the food that they need along the way.
Yeah, and they're definitely edge creatures. I find that if you can find a home that's in a forested area that has a power line cut, a river or a stream, if not two or three, near their property or running through their property, and a railroad track, and a highway or a road, which all homes have, of course, a road leading to them. But you take all of these things, the power line cut, the railroad track, the rivers, the streams, water sources, and a road, you can almost guarantee that home has had some kind of activity. Something has happened that they couldn't explain. Whether they have the guts to tell you, but I've had good luck actually even knocking on doors, and just introducing myself and tell them what I do and asking if you've had any activity. And, people do. They will in many cases report it. But they're not reporting it to any BFRO or any other agency. I believe, which segues me right to the fact, I think only about 1% of sightings are ever reported, or activity. Tiny percentage.
Yeah, I think so. And everything you described fits the description of where I had my encounters as far as the power line strips, waterways,
Really?
transition lines.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, tell me about it real quick. I'd love to hear it.
Okay. Well, it started off where I heard these whistles on my property. I was up at the top of the driveway, and it's like a forested area, and it was
Okay.
like three distinct whistles about a few seconds apart. And then I went up there about an hour later, right before it was going to get dark, and I seen these two orange lights floating through the woods. So I thought, man, that was unusual. And as I was walking back to my place, I heard this loud thump, just this giant boom in the woods, and I thought it was like a deer, but I never heard anything run off. So I thought that was unusual, but time had passed on, and I started finding structures and hearing wood knocks, tree breaks, and I was getting things like small gifts as far as like rabbits missing their heads, mushrooms like in my chair or in the middle of the road, feathers, things like that, and a lot of
Wow.
strange sounds. The dogs would be barking at the edge of the woods nonstop all day, and one dog would actually go down to the creek bottom and just be barking all night long. But one day I was picking chanterelle mushrooms, and I was kind of zigzagging through the woods, and whenever I was walking back to my house, I thought I heard something, and when I looked to my left, it just kind of looked like a stump. So I just continued walking, and then I heard something again, and when I looked back, there was a jet black Sasquatch. Just got up and walked off into the woods, just like the
Wow.
Patterson Gimlin film. But this one was jet black, like its face was coal black, and its eyes were like almond shaped. They were black, big brow ridge, flat nose, and it almost seemed like the chin was connected to its chest. And what I
Wow.
found unusual was it had like these whitish gray stripes going down its back, like these two stripes that started at the shoulder blade and ended like right above its butt, and also
Okay.
on the calf it had like these whitish gray patches as well.
So, almost stripes. That's interesting.
Yeah, it reminded me of like a giant skunk or like a lemur
Jeez.
or something like that.
Well, there was an encounter that me and Yvette had, not terribly far from my home, where it was walking on the edge of a big wildlife area, and it was plowing through the alders. But this thing had white, I can only call them little white patches or white hair, kind of distributed very evenly throughout its back.
Hmm.
So it looked almost like a European starling's feathers. It was beautiful. I mean, it was just really weird, but it was just plowing to take a shortcut so it didn't have to walk like 20 miles around the other area to get into this place where there's been numerous sightings. But the hair on this was also distinct, very distinct. So tell me, so your property has you have a power line cut near there and
Hmm. Yeah, it's a lot of oak
streams,
trees
creek.
and like a little pine forest, a few pine forests, and then it transitions into like cedars down at the creek bottom.
Oh,
But
cool.
the creek bottom leads to an area that it's like called the Merrimack River, and there's been a
In
bunch of
what state? In what state,
in,
Miguel?
in Missouri, and there's been a lot
Oh,
of BFRO reports. So that's what shocked me was I started hearing about BFRO reports after I had my encounters near the same area, and it really set things in motion, I
did did
guess.
it, did this happen in kind of the fall or winter months?
This was in July or June.
June.
I seen another one exactly a month later, and it was the juvenile, and that was in July. But that happened in
Wow.
2019.
Okay. Interesting.
Hmm.
So yeah. So if I would have seen your home on like Google Maps, I could have probably predicted there'd be Bigfoot activity there, which is just it's just these typical travel corridors that all kind of lead to one area.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think they migrate, but not in the same sense that people would like to believe, like where they're going, like from Canada all the way down to Florida. I think they just travel and look for food, and they don't really go too far, but they have a pretty large territory, and it's pretty rare to see them. So I think that's why they hardly ever get spotted.
Yeah, I mean, my guess is because they're so intelligent, they may migrate farther some years than other years. I think as long as they've got food, they're good. It's the food sources. It's they follow the ripening blueberries. They may not need to go north because of the cooler weather. They're going north because some of these animals or creatures love blueberries. Some may not like blueberries, and they're not going to travel and follow the ripening berries. They're finding more and more that animals are very individualistic. They find that deer, for instance, are far more picky, that they don't all eat the same plants. Some deer prefer these plants and berries. Some deer prefer to eat more meat. Some deer like to eat fish. Some deer don't. So, every animal is different. And I think with Bigfoots, we're dealing with a very extreme, almost in kind of the range of humans. How different our tastes are, how different our taste buds are, how different our looks are, our habits. And that adds a whole nother problem in solving the big because we can't pinpoint behaviors. There's no pattern.
Yeah, that's what I noticed. There's not too many patterns with Sasquatch, and it seems like they all have a different personality, and each group
Yep.
is
Yep.
different depending on where you're at.
Well, I guess my observations of you is you have wisdom beyond your years. I know you're probably a pretty young guy, I would imagine, but you seem to have a handle on it. It's probably that kind of thinking that's going to help solve this mystery because there really is no patterns. I can't get a handle on any of it. And I've been doing this, for since the '90s, and I don't feel I've wasted my time at all. I feel I've, brought some things to light. There's some new dot connection once in a while. I'll get a eureka moment, I guess, based on the other things that other people tell me. I think it's so important we all talk to each other. All researchers need to communicate more, fight less, be open-minded. We don't know a damn thing about these things. Absolutely nothing, except they like water, they like woods, they like edges, and that's about it. Other than that, I don't know. I don't think we really know much more.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, they like to eat deer, smash rocks together, and make tree structures, but what does it all
Yeah,
mean?
yeah, but not all of them do.
Yeah,
Some probably don't eat any deer.
yeah.
Deer are a great food source, and I think most of them do. It's it's kind of a 365 day a year food source, spring, summer, and winter. But there could be ones that are just complete vegetarians. They just don't want to eat meat. Who knows? Yeah, that's my guess. And it really makes this mystery just really tough to solve. Um, I don't know if you heard, there's a lot of content I'm not talking about in Legend Meets Science too, but one of them that I think is going to provide a lot of new data, and that is in the skin oil, because they do like to touch things. They seem real tactile. They like to touch windows on cars. And they seem to leave this white, thick, greasy, sticky skin oil behind. Now, is it skin oil or is it something that's secreted from their armpits and spread on their hands? I don't know, but there should be a unique chemical signature to it. There should be DNA sloughed off in it, and then we can get the latent details. So that's an area we're going very deep in Legend Meets Science too, because it's 3D evidence. And anybody who finds, big handprints on their house windows or their car windows, please take a ton of really good photographs, close-ups, get some Q-tips, scrape as much, or a razor blade scraper with a brand new blade in it, scrape as much of the sebum and scrape it off with a Q-tip into a paper envelope and get it to me or somebody, or just store it, because I think it's going to be really valuable.
Okay. So if I ever get a good Sasquatch hair, some blood, would I be able to send it to you to get it tested?
Absolutely. Yep, absolutely. Now, for sure.
Okay.
Once Legend Meets Science is over, I'm still a really good source to send it to, because I can vet a lot of hair, and then I can get it off to the right people who can analyze it.
Okay.
And list you as the collector.
Yeah. I think I might have a blood sample, but I'm not sure, and I don't even know if I stored it the correct way.
Yeah, that can be a tough thing. The main thing is just to keep it dry and not in contact with plastic generally.
Okay, yeah, that's where I messed up. I put it in a plastic container and it's in the freezer, so I wasn't sure what to
Well,
do
it,
with it.
it still could be good. It still could be good.
Okay.
Yeah, you should definitely get that to me.
Okay, yeah, I'll get you a sample and we'll talk more after the interview and I'll get it to you.
Yeah, no, it's exciting. Yeah, I'm really excited about this. But I'm a very impatient person,
Mm.
just by nature. I really wished I could just snap my fingers and get all this done, but I'm so dependent on other people that I can't do that. And I've only got so many days that I can film, and money that we have in budget that we can travel. But we're getting there. I'm really happy with what we've filmed so far, and what evidence that we've managed to get to the labs. So Legibate Science 2 should be a big thing. In fact, for your audience, if people do want to pre-order the doc, then it would greatly help us with financing. They can go to Untold Radio AM or the Untold Radio Network website, and then they can find, the Legend Meets Science 2 link, and they can pre-order the doc or just donate $10 and get their name in the credits.
Yeah, definitely. I'm going to check that out, and I'm going to pre-order it myself. Okay, Doug. Now, do you have anything else that you'd like to add? Any other experiences? Any strange finds?
Well, I've had numerous experiences. One of my weirdest, actually, my first Bigfoot experience happened just while driving. Roadside encounters are probably the most common. No different for me. After Monster Quest was over, once again, me and Yvette were driving south on 169 in Minnesota. If you find Mille Lacs Lake on a map, it's a big lake, kind of the middle of Minnesota. It's a huge lake. You can't even see across it. We were driving south, and we see up ahead of us what we think is probably a moose standing at the side of the road. And it was waving its antlers. That's what we thought. As we got closer in the headlights of the car, we could see it. No, it certainly wasn't a moose, but it was an upright, standing, very bulky creature, but it was waving its arms back and forth, kind of like a hula. The hula dance?
Mm-hmm.
So it was waving its arms back and forth, and we could see the hair underneath the arms, blowing in the wind. It was quite windy that night. And we could see the fingers, the arms, the shoulders, the back of the head. We could not see the eyes or the face. And this thing just kept waving its arms as we drove by. And my brain just froze up. Her brain froze up because we got within like 4 or 5 feet of that creature in car headlights. And she described it as seeing Snuffleupagus, from Sesame Street, the elephant. And that's how big it was. It was just amazing. Certainly wasn't a guy in a suit. You just go into shock. You go into a brain freeze. Your brain just completely locks up. But then after I got my wits about me, I pulled over and looked at it. And the first thing I did was open up my navigation map to look at where the creeks were and whatnot. And sure enough, it was standing right where a creek emptied into Mille Lacs Lake. It came out of a state forest. So it made sense, But once again, I could kick myself for not doing a U-turn, going back. I don't know what I would have seen, if anything. But it was as if I believe it had taken a swim and it was just drying off in this summer breeze before it went back into the forest. So you never know. I wish I would have had a dash cam, Miguel.
No, I understand, and your mind will kind of go blank whenever you have an encounter like that, and it's hard for your mind to find a place to put that.
It did, and I have 100% regrets, but I'm still glad I saw it. It reinforces, what I'm doing for a living.
Yeah. Plus, it's pretty freaky when you see one. It's like I don't want to go back there.
Well, it's certainly freaked Yvette out. We talk about it often. We've seen 2 of them together, actually 3. There was another one that we saw. She saw it more than I did, where we saw one coming out of a tree structure along the freeway on Highway 94 heading into Wisconsin, probably about maybe 30 miles out of Wisconsin Dells. And it was behind the barbed wire fence that separates the woods from the freeway. And there were dead deer everywhere along that highway, that stretch of highway. It was basically a buffet for an animal. But it was during hunting season. I'm not sure what somebody dressed in all black would be doing, walking out of one of these kind of a big teepee structures during deer hunting season. Doesn't make any sense. So she got a much better look at it than I did. I did see it, but only for a split second because I was driving. But yeah, it's those kind of things really catch you off guard.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's your favorite area to research in North America?
Yeah, as close to my house as I can get.
You said that's Minnesota?
Yeah, yeah, oh yeah, yeah. I mean, I was just in there the other day again. It's a it's a smaller area compared to most, but there's been so many sightings because it's a whole chain of lakes that are all entrophicated. They're all filled in, with sediment. They're old, very old lakes, and most of them are no trespassing. There's no homes. There's nothing on them. It's just wilderness and water, swamps. But there's been so many sightings, and that's an area that I frequent. Then I met with another researcher, and we're gonna try to get some different type of camera traps up in that area soon.
Yeah.
So, but other than that, I mean, I love to go to Snowgrove. If you've heard of the Snowgrove Lake Cabin,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I got to go there this summer, and yeah, we had activity. Everybody got to witness it 2 nights in a row, and then after I left, I had to leave one day early, yeah, to get back for a conference. And after I left, they experienced daytime pine cone throwing, something they call the thunder knock. There were two of those, and that happened the day I left. But that all happened up at Snowgrove
That's pretty
in
cool. Did they
in
come up to the
Canada.
cabin, or did you guys
Yeah.
experience it out in the woods?
Yep. Yep. They did the same kind of thing, banging on the cabin, walking on the porch, throwing stuff at the cabin. It was quite scary when you're up there and it's going on. And I was actually shocked because I hadn't been up there in 8 years. So I was kind of doubtful there'd be any activity, although we did go the exact time of year in August where there's been activity up there where I first experienced it when the blueberries are ripe. And so we went up there again that exact time and we had a ton of activity and recorded tons of stuff. Um, so they were there and it was quite scary. It was scary for all of us.
Yeah, I've had an experience like that at a cabin down in the Mark Twain National Forest. I was actually getting ready to leave for the day, and right when it got dark, one of them wood knocked right at the edge of the woods, or at the edge of the yard in the wood line, and
Mm-hmm.
we all jumped up, and our eyes were super wide, and we were just staring at that one spot, and then they started knocking all around the property,
Wow.
breaking limbs, and it lasted for like a good hour, and then you could hear them vocalizing deep in the forest. It was pretty cool.
Yeah, that sounds, it is kind of freaky. The reason Snowgrove is so freaky is because you're in a 500 square mile wilderness. There's no calling for help. There's no driving out of there. There's the doors are thin, the windows are thin. You're pretty much a sitting duck, no weapons. And so if they decide to come into the cabin, which they have gone into the cabin before, you're pretty helpless. But they seem to be pretty restrained. They seem to exercise restraint. They seem to operate kind of like black bears do. Black bears operate on fear. They'll do things to bluff you and so on, but they don't really want a confrontation. So I think that black bears and Bigfoots have a lot in common.
Yeah, I think so too. And like you mentioned earlier, I've noticed where there's Sasquatch activity, there's also been bear sightings. Have you noticed caves and springs in the areas that you research?
No, and we don't have any in the immediate area. The nearest caves are in the St. Croix Valley, about 30 miles away. And there are a lot of sightings in that area. And I have done some research in that area, and we have come across some weird things. I can say for another time. But yeah, the St. Croix Valley that divides Minnesota and Wisconsin, there's numerous karst, or also called limestone caves. And I don't know what the correlation would be, between caves and Bigfoot, but that's one area I haven't even really thought about much.
Yeah, out here in Missouri, there's a bunch of cave systems, and apparently in Florida there is too. And
Yep.
I think
Yep. Florida.
Georgia, a lot of areas that have had Bigfoot encounters. So I don't know, just kind of my theory that maybe there's like underground tunnels that are hidden by giant rocks, and between the clans, they're able to move these giant rocks and come in and out of from underground,
Well,
to our
they're
areas.
sure it's possible that they would be using cave openings, but as a general rule,
Mhm.
no animals use caves.
Yeah, yeah, true.
Um,
The only thing that made
even
me think
even
that was like grizzly bears, how they bury themselves underneath the ground and sleep for long portions of the year. But it's hard to say,
yeah,
really.
I mean, I'm not saying they don't, but generally animals could use a cave opening, but generally, the idea of them traveling in tunnels and stuff, I think it's personally a little far fetched.
Yeah,
But it, becomes an excuse why people don't, why we, for instance, haven't solved the mystery. Well, they're all underground, living in caves. Well, I don't know.
Like
Um,
what makes me think that that it might be remotely possible is like we don't find the bodies, so I think that could be an answer to that. But
it's possible, but there's enough cave spelunking. I think we would have found
mhm.
bones. I did a lot, for instance, the Mayans. There's this huge cave system in Belize, um, in Guatemala, and so on. And even the Mayans only used the caves to just sacrifice people or sacrifice, a loved one. I mean, they thought it was basically they called it Shabalba. It's hell. And most because it's so dark, how would a Bigfoot see in that kind of pitch dark? There's no light in a cave, zero. And a cave opening, I get. Um, and bones, I mean, you don't really have to go and take your dead and put them in a cave. Actually, that would kind of preserve them. The bones disappear so quick in nature, and I was the first person to take a deer carcass, tie it down, cable it down tight, so no predators could drag it off, and then set up a time lapse, with a really high end video camera and time lapse the entire carcass disappearing. It doesn't take long. In 10 days, there's not a trace. Everything's gone. The mice eat the bones. In most cases, just everything's simply gone. But who knows? We don't know what they're doing with their dead. Obviously, we're dealing with a rare animal. I'm out there's 1,000 in all of North America. Um, for instance, we have 40,000 black bears just in Minnesota. But now take 4,000 creatures and divide them up amongst all the states and all of Canada. Chances of finding any bones become, nil, just nil.
Yeah, I agree, and I think they're just able to move freely around people, and their senses are out of this world.
First thing that happens when an animal is dying, it'll go thick, deep into cover, where humans never go, off trail. And that's probably what's going on, that they're, when they're sick or, injured or have a disease or just dying of old age, they probably seek a very thick part, completely away from any human activity to die. Um, but once again, I don't know. I'm just guessing.
Yeah, it's a logical theory. Okay, Doug, do you have any other experiences you'd like to share? Or
Well, not really. I mean, I I could tell stories all night. Trust me.
yeah,
But
yeah. It's a lot of
I don't.
information you have to share, and a
Yeah.
lot of years worth of work.
But I think that we definitely got some good information out. The main thing to remember is that if you're going to do research in this field, try to get evidence. At the very least, an audio recorder. We're finding more and more scientific evidence with audio recordings. At least, leave audio recorders out. Zoom H1 is a great recorder because the batteries will last, more than a day. Um, and you can record on the. You don't need to record in RAW. You can record in just MP3. But do at least that. Leave a piece of black or blue plexiglass that's high gloss. Put a piece of Velcro in the corner. Try to collect hair and sebum. They seem to be very curious about glossy surfaces, which is probably why they're touching car windows. There's nothing glossy in the forest. The only thing glossy they ever see or shiny is the water. So maybe they think it's vertical water. Do something. Quit using camera traps. Trade them in for surveillance cameras, like these Wise cameras, and disguise them. Cover them with moss. Chop or drill a hole in a tree. Make it so you can't see the damn camera. Cameras like that can record constantly for days. And then, just check on it. But I guess it would be great that everybody who hears this to try new things. Don't just keep doing the same things over and over. Or don't be one of those people that does research every week, every month, but never collects any evidence. Collect something. Collect audio evidence. They don't seem to have any fear of audio recorders. Anything's better than nothing. So with that, I'll say goodnight.
All right. Thank you very much, Doug. And if you guys can, check out Legend Meets Science 2. And it was a pleasure to have you on the show, Doug. So you have a good night, and hopefully we talk soon in the future.
Thanks, Miguel.
Yep, thank you. Take care. Alrighty, Doug, thank you very much for being a guest on the show, and it was an absolute pleasure talking with you today. And I felt like I was watching an episode of Monster Quest Live, just because I remember hearing your experiences on different shows and the things that you've found, and it was cool hearing that firsthand. If you guys can, go and check out Legend Meets Science 2. I know Doug is really excited to release that, and if you guys can, go check it out, support it any way you can, and it will really help out Doug with his research and providing evidence for the people. Like he said, even if it's something small like a track or a hair sample, anything is better than nothing. And I'm glad there are people out there taking an approach like this as far as using audio recorders, forensic science, anything that we can do to convince others that they're out there and not make us look crazy. So I appreciate that very much. But yeah, people are on a search for these creatures, so it's like a manhunt. Anything that would work for hunting down a human would probably work for these creatures, as far as thermal, night vision, drones, dogs, anything that law enforcement would use to hunt somebody down would certainly work in this field. And wildlife forensics is a real thing. Forensic science overall, as far as getting fingerprints, DNA analysis, and just having a professional eye under the microscope can yield a lot of results. But yeah, if you guys enjoyed today's episode, please like and subscribe. Be sure to hit the bell notification to stay up to date with all my future videos. And if you have a Sasquatch encounter that you would like to share, please contact me at sasquatchtheory@outlook.com. I appreciate everyone for watching. Thank you very much, and take care.